So Juan's asking, if you improve the status of stomach acid levels, are you less likely to have symptoms when accidentally glutened? No. But if you improve the level of your stomach acid production, you are more likely to better break down your food so that you can digest and extrapolate nutrients from that food. But having more stomach acid is not going to protect you from gluten if you're getting glutened. What vitamin deficiency can cause painful bladder syndrome, like interstitial cystitis, already on a true gluten-free diet for years? So, interestingly enough, it's not necessarily, at least in my experience, it's not a vitamin deficiency that I see play out with interstitial cystitis, although B vitamin deficiencies are very common amongst people with a diagnosis of IC. It's more about oxalate in my experience. If you're following a true gluten-free diet, one of the things about the true gluten-free diet, depending on how you're eating, if you're gravitating toward a lot of the gluten-free flours, for example, the almond flour, it's very high in oxalate, and oxalates are known trigger factors for interstitial cystitis. So you might just go back and review. I did a very lengthy video on oxalate and a blog post on oxalate with a lot of research that you can track down and look at that. And I would look at maybe incorporating lower oxalates in your diet to see if that doesn't help you. The other thing you can ask your doctor to run is a 24-hour oxalate urine test to measure whether or not you have excessive oxalates that might be contributing to that problem. Let's see, Robert asks, why is B6 often overlooked and not talked about? Mostly because it's not talked about because there's a lack of knowledge. I mean, what doctor wants to showcase their ignorance? I mean, ultimately, that's the way I look at it. B6 is super critical for a number of different functions, but it's not as popular as, say, B12. B12, probably of all the B vitamins, B12 and folate have been made wildly popular by genetic tests available online that measure MTHFR and MTR gene mutations that are linked to folate and B12 function. So I would say with B6, though, there is a genetic test linked to B6, potential B6 problems and mutations, and that's cystathione beta synthase, or the CBS gene, but not very many people talk about it. I think my friend and colleague Ben Lynch is probably one of the few that really go into the depth and the details around that. Let's see here. Can lack of enzymes cause slow gut emptying? Tracy is asking. Yes, lack of enzymes can cause slow gut emptying, and double down on that. Not only can they cause slow gut emptying, but they can cause your food to rot inside of you and releasing all kinds of putrefaction byproducts that can damage your GI tract, creating leaky gut. So lack of digestive enzymes is not a good situation to have. This is one of the reasons why pancreatic disease is so dangerous, pancreatitis and pancreatic dysfunction, because remember, your pancreas is one of the primary producers of enzymes to help you digest your food. Let's see here. Can you explain digestive enzyme elastase from the pancreas and its difference from the enzymes that you mentioned? Yeah, so there are a number of different types of enzymes, but ones that doctors will traditionally measure, elastase is one, and it's an enzyme produced by the pancreas that helps you break down your food. But then there's, in the bloodstream, there are some enzymes that many doctors will look at and measure. Amylase is one of them, lipase is another. Now, if these are pancreatic enzymes, if they're extremely high in your blood, then it's an indicator that the pancreas could potentially be inflamed. So they're indicators for pancreatitis. Now, if the enzymes are extremely low, this can be an indicator that your pancreas, that the exocrine function of your pancreas is underperforming, and that might make you predisposed to not being able to properly digest your food very well. Either scenario is not good. But amylase, as a general rule of thumb, amylase is an enzyme that helps you break down carbohydrate. Lipase is an enzyme that helps you break down fat. So different enzymes are more specific for different macronutrients. And so those are some of the basic general differences. Let's see. Okay, I think I answered that one. Yeah, cereals, somebody's commenting, cereals use mostly iron filings, which are indigestible. Yeah, the iron fortification of the cereal industry and the grain industry is horrific. It's not a healthy version or variety of iron that I would encourage. And that's the way with a lot of the fortification. Folic acid is the B vitamin. It's a synthetic B9 that's used to fortify cereals and breads and other things. And in my opinion, folic acid increases the risk, and not just my opinion, but researchers have actually studied this, can actually increase the risk for certain types of cancers and other health issues. So a lot of times when the U.S. has a fortification law for nutrients in a food, it doesn't always pan out the way they had hoped it would. Yeah, I don't know that the drug companies fear me. I got to look over my shoulder, I'll say that. But glad you're enjoying honesty in my message. I appreciate that, Prince. Does spirulina contain gluten or histamine? I'm not sure on the histamine content of spirulina. That being said, does it contain gluten? No, it does not, unless it's cross-contaminated with gluten. But true spirulina does not contain gluten. Let's see, Chucho asks if I do vitamin and mineral testing. Of course I do. I've been doing it for 20 years. It's something that, when people come to see me, that we do as a basic. To me, it's the most basic of basic parameters you can investigate if you're trying to help somebody in their path. Let's see, scroll down on that right side and on that left side for me. Let's see here. 2 questions from Laura. When I had a gluten flare, I took lysine to help reduce my EBV load. To my surprise, it caused my psoriasis to flare. Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. So first of all, we don't have time to get into a dissertation on Epstein-Barr virus or EBV, but when you take high doses of an amino acid, there can be consequences. Certain amino acids compete with others. So high doses of lysine, for example, can affect your arginine. And your arginine is very, very important amino acid for vasodilation, for blood vessel health, for cardiovascular health, but also for immune function. And just like lysine is important, it's an amino acid commonly used because it's been shown in cases of herpes virus to reduce the replication. I don't know that I've seen any great solid research that backs up that lysine can be used for every single type of virus, but it's just one that commonly that people equate for using in viral cases. What test do you recommend for fatty liver? If you're talking about what test to identify fatty liver, I recommend that you go visit your doctor. They're probably going to run an ultrasound. They might do a CT, an abdominal CT scan. They're going to run some blood tests that are going to look at different types of liver enzymes. And the imaging might tell them that there's fatty infiltration, but the enzymes might tell them that your liver is struggling to properly function. So those are tests to help you identify whether or not fatty liver is a problem. As far as intracellular tests, that's what you ask for. You ask for an intracellular lymphocyte proliferation test. Okay, so part 2 of that question from Laura, can lysine be an instigator of gluten sensitivity? Not to my knowledge. It's not that it's an instigator of gluten sensitivity, but I would look at the quality of the supplements that you're taking, because many over-the-counter products are contaminated and cross-contaminated with gluten. It's because a lot of supplement manufacturers produce, heavy quantities of wheat and other grains in their factories, and so you can potentially get that cross-contamination. Matt is asking, what foods do I recommend for someone with celiac disease? It's not that I recommend any specific foods, Matt. I recommend that you eat healthy. I recommend more not what to eat as much as I recommend what. Let me reframe that. I recommend more not what you should eat, but more what you shouldn't eat. So if you've got celiac disease and you're not following a true gluten-free diet, some research says as many as 92% of people following a traditional gluten-free diet fail to have recovery of intestinal damage after years of gluten-induced problem. So a true gluten-free diet is what I would recommend as far as what foods to eat within that true gluten-free diet. Probably the easiest and quickest way to get access to something like that would be to read No Grain, No Pain and apply phase 1 and phase 2 of that diet immediately. And then from there, just going on and observing what foods that your body agrees with more than anything else. And if you continue to struggle, get with a doctor to run some testing to help you analyze if there are potential foods that are healthy otherwise that you're actually reacting to as a unique individual. I love that. Judy says, thanks for all your info. Your book changed my health and my life. I can't hear that enough, Judy. That's really what fuels me. So thanks for sharing that. Do you have supplements with them all in together? Carol, I'm not sure if I understand what you mean, but do I have supplements with all these nutrients together? Yes. If you are looking for, again, a good quality multi, as I was talking about earlier, I moved the slide, but we've got 2 different types of multivitamins. We have one that's called Ultra Nutrients, and then we have another one that's called multi-nutrients. And the difference between the two is that multi-nutrients is a higher B complex in it. So it's designed for people that are lower in B vitamins, aggressively so. And so it just has a higher quantity of the B vitamins in it, particularly vitamin B6, which is very, very critical for people to repair and recover post-gluten-induced damage. So to answer your question, yes. If you go over to glutenfreesociety.org and hit the shop button, you'll find an entire library of specialty formulated products that I've created over the years. As I've seen different people, these are products that I've created based on my expertise in the field of nutrition. And you can peruse through there, but we've got pretty much everything under the sun. Rachel is asking about methotrexate. Is it dangerous? Yes. But if it was diagnosed, I would imagine you probably have rheumatoid arthritis or rheumatological arthritis. Methotrexate is a cancer medicine. It's actually used, it's an anti-cancer drug. And one of the dangerous aspects of methotrexate, side effect-wise, is it inhibits folate. This is why if you were prescribed it, your doctor probably gave you prescription folic acid. Again, the problem with folic acid is that it's a synthetic version of folate. And so, again, drug-induced nutritional deficiencies, methotrexate induces folate deficiency. Methotrexate inhibits your DNA and RNA from replicating. And the problem with that is it causes your body over time to not be able to heal and repair things. And so fast forward that use by 10 or 15 or 20 years. Another side effect of methotrexate that, it's unfavorable is that it damages the GI tract. There's a lot of research showing that methotrexate contributes to leaky gut. And so those will all be concerns I would have. I'll bring those concerns up with your doctor, and walk through those. But yes, there are aspects to methotrexate. Remember, it's like any other medicine. There's a reason why doctors describe it as something called a risk-benefit ratio. Does the risk of the side effects of the drug outweigh the benefits the medication provides to the patient? And so this is what doctors are thinking about in their mind before they prescribe it. The problem with traditional medicine, and the way I see it, is that most doctors don't understand drug-induced nutritional deficiencies, and they underscore the long-term detriment of using a medicine over years and years and years. And some doctors, they've seen crippling, in the case of methotrexate, some doctors, they've seen crippling, rheumatoid arthritis, and they think, okay, well, we don't want you to become crippled, so the risk of the side effects of that medicine is better weighed against you potentially becoming crippled. I personally don't think that way. I think that, more than trying to drug you into submission of your symptoms, I think a better question to ask would be, why does the disease exist in the first place? What are the trigger factors for you and how that disease began and how that disease process began? And are any of those trigger factors diet or lifestyle issues that if you changed would reduce the severity of your illness? That really is where the true empowerment starts. It's in identifying what you're doing wrong and making adjustments to diet and lifestyle. Can you have gluten sensitivity if you have no GI symptoms? Jane wants to know. Jane, that's a great question. Yes, that's why we have this term called non-celiac gluten sensitivity. There's another term in the medical literature oftentimes referred to as silent celiac disease, meaning a person can actually have a gluten issue, but they don't have any observable damage to their GI tract when their doctor measures or does a scope. but they have gluten-induced damage in other parts of their body. Silent celiac disease can manifest, for example, as gluten-induced ataxia and neuropathy. It can manifest as fatty liver disease. It can manifest as hypothyroidism. And those are all areas of where the damage is occurring outside of the GI tract. What doctors oftentimes refer to as extra-intestinal manifestations. Okay. Donna's asking, what's the best thing for yeast overgrowth? Depends. I would say there are a lot of different strategies for yeast overgrowth, but the number one thing that you should do if you suspect a yeast overgrowth is stop heavy carbohydrate consumption. Yeast is like a stray cat. If you put food out on the porch, it keeps coming back. And you know, the food on the porch analogy is kind of like the overconsumption of carbohydrates. You feed the yeast with carbohydrates. They love fermenting carbohydrates. So lower carbohydrate diets, this is why keto diets and carnivore diets and paleo diets are super popular, because they're lower carbohydrate, generally speaking, and oftentimes that lower carbohydrate can help starve out a yeast overgrowth. Alcohol is a big no-no. Sugar is a big no-no. You know, so if you're not changing your diet to address the potential for yeast overgrowth, it doesn't matter what pills you take. The pills come after diet change. When you've changed your diet, if you're looking at what are some things that have natural antifungal properties that you might be able to use that could support, you know, your overall health in that way, you can use there are lots of different things. I mean, I have a formula called Yeast Shield. I have another formula with caprylic acid in it. Caprylic acid is a very good and very well established compound that yeast don't like. That it makes yeast struggle to grow and replicate. It actually carves little holes inside the membranes and cell walls of yeast, so it can be very effective. And another is a good probiotic. Again, create competition. There's really 4 strategies to help with yeast overgrowth. 1 is to flush them out. 2 is to starve them out. 3 is to poison them out. And 4 is to create competition for them. And that competition is created through probiotic use. So hopefully those strategies are helpful for you. Oh, good. I like this question. We don't get many of these. Last days, 316. What's the best way to keep or get weight up for a hard gainer on a grain-free diet? You know, probably the strategy that if you're on a grain-free diet and you're a hard gainer, you really got to get dialed in with things with your training like glutamine and branched chain amino acids. And really, what I prefer to see people use in this situation, so if you're trying to build your body and build your muscle mass, is a very, very potent amino acid formula with the individual amino acids in it. So not like your protein powders as much as your individual aminos in a formula that you can add to your protein powder. So that would be, I have something called Ultra Amino that's really, really good for that. Another thing is creatine monohydrate, probably one of the most well-studied and safest ways to pack on. And the way it works is it doesn't actually pack muscle on you, but it increases, when you're working out, you know, you get to the burning stage where the muscle's on fire and you want to quit because it hurts so bad. What creatine monohydrate does is it gives you like an extra 3 to 7 seconds where you can put out 2 or 3 more repetitions of work. And that doesn't sound like much, but multiply that over 6 months for every workout that you do. And what it ends up doing is it ends up getting you better muscle tearing. When you get better muscle tearing, you get better muscle build back and regrowth. So tried and true creatine monohydrate, very, very good way to hydrates the muscle, but it can help you enhance your workout to pack on more for you. If that's what you meant, I think that's what you meant last days, but hopefully that's helpful. So Laura's saying, okay, so so 3 months ago I cut out rice, was already grain-free except for rice. Now I've been feeling so much weaker and have lost more weight and have less strength. If you cut out rice, what you may have done is cut out a source of calories and not replace that source of calories with something else comparable. And so what happens to a lot of people when they're going grain-free is they're struggling because they're trying to figure out what to eat at first. And so they end up undernourishing themselves. In essence, they're under the bar for total caloric value. They're not getting enough calories in to sustain normal, healthy energy production. So the first thing I would suggest that you do is count your calories and just see where you're falling. If you're, without your height and weight and age and everything else, which we don't have time to get into tonight, it's hard for me to give you kind of a number to shoot for, but I'll kind of give you a generalization. So a woman with a weight of about 135 pounds, if she's trying to maintain that weight of 135 pounds, again, depending on height and age and weight, is going to need somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,500 to 1,600 calories just to maintain that. And so just depending on where you're at, if you're at 1,200 calories, you're going to have a hard time keeping that weight on if that's your scenario. So count your calories first. Let's see here. Okay, so I'm gluten intolerant, but still eat it from time to time. Give me muscle pain. I'm not sure I understand your question in that. Look, if you're gluten sensitive and you're eating it from time to time, here's what you should know, that one breadcrumb of gluten, if you're gluten sensitive, can cause inflammation that lasts for up to 2 months. That's not a lot of gluten, and that's a lot of inflammation potential. So if you cheat once every couple of weeks, think about that. You're potentially perpetuating inflammation for 2 months, even though you're only eating it every 2 weeks. My advice is quit cheating, right? Dial it in, get it right. It's your life, and food is not more important than your health. Let's see, Heather asks, how can we get digestive enzymes for kids who have trouble swallowing pills? That's a great question. Heather, we have a product called Gluten Shield for kids, and it's a full spectrum digestive enzyme designed for kids. It's chewable. And even for adults, we have many adults that have a hard time swallowing because of goiters or thyroid problems, and so chewable works better for them. So Gluten Shield for kids is a great product. It can be used in that regard. Let's see here. Let's scroll down on the left. Does too much protein cause gout? Question from Grace. No. Too much uric acid can exacerbate gout, and certain proteins can contain more, a byproduct of uric acid production than not. The traditional line of thought around gout is uric acid forms crystals in the joint, like in the toe, depending on where your gout is showing up. It's most common in the big toe, but it can also affect other joints in the earlobes and other tissues. Is uric acid. So, you might look at what you're eating that has high uric acid content. But one of the other things to consider, because I have seen actually the opposite be true. I've seen a number of people with gout who do better on a higher protein diet, despite what traditional knowledge would purvey or tell us. And so it's not always true that high protein increases a gout exacerbation. I see more specifically with gout, I see like high rich cheeses and things of that nature create problems with gout or exacerbations with gout. But one of the things I see that helps cut down on exacerbations of gout is zinc. Again, one of the reasons I recommend testing nutrition, there's an enzyme called xanthine oxidase, which helps to break down some of the byproducts that contribute to gout. And if you're zinc deficient, then you have trouble with that enzyme production, and it can become an issue. So you might consider, asking your doctor to measure your zinc levels as well if you're struggling. But I would less worry about protein intake and be more worried about quality, unless you've seen a direct reflective, like every time you eat, animal meat, for example, you get a gouty flare. In that case, you've got to listen to your body. You should have that intuitive to always listen to how your body speaks to you as well. So I think I answered that question. Marilyn also asked, what harm is done if I'm gluten-free but succumb to eating a plate of regular pasta from time to time? Yeah, there's a lot of harm done, especially if you're still struggling with Hashimoto's. That's the harm, right? Hashimoto's is known to be caused not just by gluten, but gluten can certainly be a cause of Hashimoto's. I have celiac and terrible problems swallowing. Any suggestions? Yes, Kathy. A lot of times what happens with celiacs is what we talked about tonight, is the nutritional deficiency caused by gluten for so many years creates an incapacity or inability to heal. And sometimes those nutritional deficiencies are mineral based. And so problem swallowing can come from different things. So one problem would be you have a goiter that's enlarged and it's putting pressure on your esophagus, making it harder to swallow. So definitely follow up with your doctor. Have them palpate your thyroid, maybe do a thyroid ultrasound and rule that out, because celiac disease and Hashimoto's go hand in hand. A lot of times people have both of those diseases with the linkage to gluten. But another common problem that I see is somebody who's under a lot of stress and develops mineral deficiencies. A lot of the different minerals, for example, calcium, magnesium, and then you have electrolytes like potassium. When you're low in those, will cause spasm. If you've ever had a muscle twitch, like an eyelid twitch or shoulder muscle twitch, imagine your esophagus is also a muscle. And so if your esophagus is chronically tight, just like your muscles can get tight, well, your esophagus is a muscle, it can get tight. That means it can constrict up, it can narrow the opening, and it can make it harder to swallow. So again, going back to what we've talked about tonight, one of the probably best things that you could do is have your doctor run and look at your nutritional status, because if you've got calcium or magnesium or potassium deficiency or any of these nutrients that play a role in how your muscle contracts and relaxes, remember the smooth muscle of your GI tract contracts and relaxes. And if you've got virtual tightness of that tissue, it can create a trouble or a challenge for swallowing. But it'd definitely be a good idea to get it checked out. Jenny asked which one of our formulas has caprylic acid. It's called ultra caprylic acid, Jenny. So if you can't find it, you can always call the number on glutenfreesociety.org and they can send it out to you. Let's see, scroll down a little bit. There we go. If you have some celiac genes, hetero, but a grain-free diet drops TPO antibodies, should you assume you are celiac or non-celiac gluten sensitive? You can make that assumption. You may or may not be right. And here's what I mean. If you haven't read No Grain, No Pain, I'm just going to give you one example. Many of the people that go grain-free benefit for more than one reason. In essence, gluten is a protein found in all grain, but it's not the only protein in grain that's known to create or flare autoimmune problems. There's another, I'm going to give you an example. In wheat, there's a protein called amylase trypsin inhibitor, ATI, if we want to just abbreviate that protein's name. ATI is known to activate toll-like receptors in the gut, leading to the potentiation of autoimmune disease. So you may have gone grain-free and you may not be gluten sensitive, but you may have just been reacting to the wheat protein ATI. So that's just one example of why it might not be gluten, and that you can't 100% assume that you're gluten sensitive. This is one of the reasons why I like genetic testing. And I don't know what you mentioned, genetic testing. I don't know what tests that you had done or how many different markers that you had looked at, but a lot of these online tests are inaccurate. I had a person today that had a 23andMe test done, and it showed that they didn't have any celiac gene markers, but they had the same, not the same test, but they had a genetic testing done through Gluten Free Society, and they actually had celiac markers. And this is, I can't vouch for what 23andMe does behind the scenes, but I can at Gluten Free Society. We hold to a much higher standard because of our ethics and morals, and we're there to serve people. And again, that's not to say that 23andMe is not, but it just struck me as quite alarming to see a person that had a 23andMe test negative for celiac genes, but have a PCR test, which stands for polymerase chain reaction DNA test, that measures all the different genetic potential alleles for gluten sensitivity and non-celiac gluten sensitivity. And her results showed that she actually did have celiac genes. So again, I'm leery of a lot of these online testing services for that reason. It's not the first time I've seen that be the case. What besides collagen can help heal skin? Michelle asks. Lots of things, Michelle. Collagen is helpful, but copper and zinc are helpful for skin. Vitamin A is necessary for skin health. Vitamin E is necessary for skin health. Biotin is oftentimes referred to as the skin, hair, and nail vitamins. So these nutrients are all super critical and important for the skin to turn over properly and to make new skin cells in a healthy, robust fashion. So again, going back to why did I say tonight is the number one most important lesson I could teach? Because if you guys are getting the theme to a lot of these questions, when you ask me the questions, I'm alluding back to what I've already taught. The reason why it's the number one thing I could teach you is because if you know what your nutritional status is, You can largely stop guessing at which vitamin should I take to heal my skin, which vitamin should I take to grow better hair, which vitamin should I take to support my liver. You have to understand that vitamins and minerals have overlap in their function, right? If we just think of magnesium as the perfect example, to date, we know of more than 700 functions for magnesium alone. So it can affect your skin, it can affect your hair, it can affect your metabolism, it can affect your energy level, it can affect your sleep. Like there's so many different ways that one nutrient can affect you. So again, going back to the core of this message, which is if you analyze your nutritional status, you can take away a lot of the guesswork and you can get real accurate with your nutritional supplementation. Can gluten sensitivity cause the esophagus to contract out of sequence? Absolutely it can, Christy. I've actually seen cases. There's a condition associated with gluten, and it's oftentimes, it's referred to as slow transit time by many doctors, or delayed gastric emptying. And one of the reasons why we get a delayed emptying is because the esophagus and the intestinal muscles, and they all spasm, right? So whether they're spasming in concert with one another or whether they're beating out of order, you can have that happen as a result of gluten exposure. Okay, let's see. I'm sure that why I got leaky gut. No, not a question. So that's a good question. Laura says, why can some people eat pasta and bread, etc., and others like myself cannot? I grew up with Italian parents and ate bread and pasta all the time as well as protein. I've ruined my stomach for 20, 30 years. That's the fundamental question, isn't it, Laura? Why can some people run fast? Why can some people, calculate math equations better, right? Why can some doctors understand biochemistry and nutrition better than others? I mean, we all have gifts. We all have talents. And we're blessed if we can discover what those talents are, and we're blessed if we can discover what those detriments could be. You're blessed to have discovered that gluten affects you. That's the way I would have you look at it, because just because other people can have it and it doesn't bother them the way it bothers you, doesn't mean that you should eat it or feel socially inclined to do so. And I think that's recognizing your gifts, your strengths, and your weaknesses is a part of the journey of life. So that's the best answer I could really give you in that scenario. Is muscle pain in the legs related to gluten sensitivity? Not cramps, pain. Yes, pain, inflammation. The book is named No Grain, No Pain. And muscle pain in the legs can definitely be a manifestation. There's a condition called myofasciitis, which is when your muscles and fascia become inflamed, and gluten can induce it, can create and contribute to it. So it's very possible that that's the case. Now, there's certainly other causes of muscle pain in the legs, but gluten can definitely be one of them. Okay, so this is a great question. So Jay wants to know, I'm on a wheat, rye, barley-free diet. So you're on a traditional gluten-free diet. We'll crunch that into what's called traditional gluten-free. For 10 years, I eat organic certified gluten-free oat. My anti-gliadin antibody was high on a test. Does the Gluten Shield supplement get rid of the IgA reaction? No. You don't take Gluten Shield so that you can continue to eat gluten. The issue probably that you've got, Jay, is that you're getting gluten exposure and you just don't know from where. Now, oats have a form of gluten called avenin, and I don't care whether they're certified in organic or not. Avenin is a form of gluten, and for many celiac individuals, it creates a problem. Now, that being said, your test that you had done was an anti-gliadin antibody. There is no gliadin in oat, so the oat is not the cause of the gliadin elevation. You're getting wheat, barley, and rye from somewhere. And it's probably if you eat out at restaurants or if you eat what we call here in Dr. Osborne's world, OPF. OPF is other people's food. You run the risk of gluten cross-contamination or potential. Now, your oats, even though they're certified gluten-free, might also still be cross-contaminated. There have been a number of times where products have been recalled because they were certified gluten-free, but actually ended up being cross-contaminated with wheat, barley, and rye anyway. And so that could also be an issue. So I would look at your diet and whether you're eating out or whether you're eating packaged foods or processed foods, because that's a lot of times where people are going to find that hidden gluten exposure, that traditional hidden gluten exposure. What's the best grocery store to shop for gluten-free foods? It's called your garden, honestly. There isn't a best grocery store. I mean, most grocery stores carry the same products from the same companies and vendors, so there's not like one that's better necessarily than the other. I would say it depends on what you buy. If you shop the perimeter of the store, which I would encourage you to do, you're in the meat section, you're in the produce section. And so there's very little risk of cross-contamination when you're buying, creative strawberries versus when you're buying boxed packaged food that's produced in a facility that also practices the production of other grain-based foods. So, the grocery store, the perimeter, shop the perimeter and grow as much food as you probably can. Oh, okay, man, I think we ran out of time. Wow, we're really over tonight. I didn't mean to do that. Thanks for staying with me tonight. I know probably you stayed with me because we were answering all the questions, but hey, it's been great. I hope you learned a lot. And when I say the number one thing, I really, really, truly mean that. Nutrition is near and dear to my heart, but it's near and dear to your health, right? And if you understand what you lack and where you lack, then you're empowered to make meaningful changes that can have huge impact on your overall health and wellness. So really, really take what I said to heart. Take that list of tests, get your levels measured a couple times a year, and get it dialed in. This is Dr. Osborne wishing you an excellent, excellent week and excellent health as well. Take care. We'll see you next time. Hey, if you've got a functional medicine or health question that you'd like me to answer for you, make sure you send me an email, glutenology@gmail.com, and we'll do our best to create a video answer just for you. Have a great day.